Greetings, this is Doc I coming to you live and direct today from Black Facts Headquarters Central. Yes, we're a little delayed in our start today, but we're going to get it on and we're going to do this whole thing and we're going to make sure that we do it right because we certainly don't want to do it wrong. That's right. So, this month, all month, we're celebrating the birthday of the Right Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Absolutely. All this month. And we hope that you will stick with us in spite of any anomalous activity that may interfere with our maintaining our regular schedule, because sometimes things do happen. But as we're going through this process of bringing you this information, we're keenly aware of the fact that we are documenting these the biographies of these people, the deeds of these heroes and sheroes for all time. And so we want to make sure that we do it right, because once we do it, we don't want to have to do it over again. We want to be able to hit it and quit it and be able to go on to whatever comes next. And so that's a very real concern that we do have, excuse me. Now, another one is why I can't get my Mac to work today, but eventually I'll get my Mac on. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and get this party started. Number one, if you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and then make sure to spread the word far and wide as to what we are doing right here on Black Facts. We're here at Black Facts Headquarters Central, providing you with information and sometimes even a little infotainment. Yeah, a little infotainment. I think I just coined that word because I never heard that one come out of my mouth before. But regardless of that, we want to do this in a way that is pleasing and keeps you engaged always. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and read our words of wisdom for the day from the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Let's see what words of wisdom, what jewels does he have to drop on us today. Let's see what we got here today. All right. Life is that existence that is given to man to live for a purpose, to live to his own satisfaction and pleasure, providing he forgets not the God who created him and who expects a spiritual obedience and observation of the moral laws that he has inspired. Wow. Boy, this brother could wax eloquent, I tell you that much. Now, for all the talk we have around here about people talking white, I want y'all to keep in mind that we're quoting Marcus Mosiah Garvey here, way back in the 1920s, maybe as late as the 1930s, but we're way back in time, and here he is from another country where the people do speak English, but are known to speak English in a very different way. But when you listen to the words of that I read to you of his, you can't tell that he's from Jamaica. There's no way to tell because he waxes eloquent at every single point. I really would have liked to have met Marcus Garvey just to see, could he talk our way and them their ways? I would like to see that. I'm sure he probably could, because being multilingual probably was not a problem for him. He did go down there to Costa Rica and Colombia and some other countries where Spanish is the main language. So I'm assuming the man was at least bilingual, if not tri or quadrilingual. But neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and read from our book. Wrong book. Where is our book at today? Okay, now what happened to the book I had? Ah, here we go. Because we got the last part we're going to read in here from the book by J.A. Rogers. We had one more part we're going to read in here about Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Here we go. Marcus Garvey. I don't know what happened to my page marker, though. I had a page marker in here somewhere. There we go. Okay. Here we go. So the question here, as we read from the book from J.A. Rogers' book, The World's Great Men of Color, he asked the question, was Garvey honest? Was Garvey honest? The answer to this depends on one's point of view. A leader may be thoroughly honest and yet appear insincere and dishonest to many. Garvey was a Messiah who had come to save a people who for centuries had been exploited by another race. And a Messiah without a promised land has about as great a chance for success as a political candidate who promises his constituents nothing. Moses had his Canaan, Jesus his heaven, Muhammad his paradise. The early Christians were no less simple in their beliefs than the Garveyites. It was amusing, to put it mildly, to listen to clergymen ridiculing Garvey about his dream empire in Africa. If Garvey, like these Christians, had had the power of the law and the sword behind him, his paradise would have been accepted without a murmur. As it was, not even the fact that his paradise was planned for the earth saved it. It was called idiotic. Though it wouldn't have taken his followers more than a little money to get there, which is more than can be said for these clergymen's heaven. As a matter of fact, some of Garvey's followers did go to Africa. There can be no question as to Garvey's ability. He had all the potentialities of a Hitler and a Mussolini. His cause was just, too, but his methods were twisted, archaic, perverse, according to J.A. Rogers. He undoubtedly wanted to help the downtrodden blacks, but like every other autocrat, believed that the end justified the means. Like all other messiahs, too, he was a poet and romancer and knew how to soothe the sufferings of his followers with hopes of paradise. He could paint such halcyon pictures of this to his assembled cohorts that they would actually feel themselves already there. At one of his meetings in Carnegie Hall, New York, even 2 or 3 of the men went into hysterics, while the women shouted and shrieked. He furthermore gave his followers what they wanted even more than earthly goods: hope of revenge. We will build, he said, so strong a government in the motherland that when they lynch a Negro in Georgia or Alabama, we will have but to press a button and 6 white men will be lynched in Africa. Wow, now that's pretty potent. He also promised them someday all the whites in Africa will be driven into the sea and the Negro race will become so strong that it will build a black house side by side with the White House in Washington, D.C. He even led his followers to believe that in Africa was a magic so powerful that it would pull airplanes out of the sky and turn machine gun bullets to water. When one of his leaders told a gullible audience in Liberty Hall of this magic, which he called the ancient mysteries of Africa, Garvey repeated the same in the Negro world in such a way as to endorse it. In short, his simple-minded followers believed in the Garvey heaven just as earnestly as educated Germans and Italians believed in the Hitler and the Mussolini ones. Since, therefore, hope and promise are all about that, the rank and file of any movement have ever received from their messiahs, Garvey, according to this precedent, could not be said to have defrauded his followers. One fact was clear, too. He had profited little or nothing by the millions of dollars he had taken in. While no Gandhi in self-sacrifice, he lived more simply than many a Negro leader who had taken in far less money. His salary at no time exceeded $100 a week. And for lunch, he usually ate crackers and cheese. He never owned a car, and he lived in an ordinary Harlem apartment. During his trial, he was practically penniless, owning but $30 in the bank and 289 shares of his worthless stock. Of course, much of the money went for advertising himself, so much so that the judge in charge of the jury said that if it had been proved that he hadn't stolen a penny, but had misused the funds for publicizing himself, he was still guilty. As for the economic side of Garvey's program, it was doomed from the start. Even had it been conducted on sound business lines, it was based on racism, which runs counter to the law of gain, that is, buying in the cheapest market and selling in the dearest. This human trait is above all racial, religious, and political dogma. It recognizes neither color nor creed. Blacks will spend their money among whites if it is to their advantage, and the reverse is also true. Furthermore, there is no proof that anywhere in history there has been a pure white, pure black, or pure brown or yellow civilization, but that all were mixed to a greater or less degree. Garvey's justification for a black empire was in rebuttal to an Anglo-Saxon cry for white supremacy, but since this latter was a fraud and delusion, his rebuttal was the same kind of monstrosity. If the southern states, with all their power and their laws, have not succeeded in establishing a lily white land, what hope would Garvey have of establishing an ebony black one in Africa, where the whites already were in powerful control? Moreover, any intelligent leader must realize that not race but economics are at the bottom of human conflict. The blacks of Africa have been torn by strife among themselves long before the pharaohs, and were racked by tribal and national wars and barbarities precisely as were the American Indians, the Chinese, the Dyaks, and the white Europeans. Indeed, Garvey's organization, even in its infancy, had shown signs of this strife. He had planned to start in Liberia, but he quarreled with the Liberian government even before he got there, and he was forced to leave his sawmill and other equipment sent there to rot. Edwin Barclay, Liberian minister interviewed by the New York Times, flatly announced that neither Garvey nor any of those identified with him would be received in Liberia. It was alleged at the time that the Garveyites, once in Liberia, planned to seize control. You know that wasn't going to go good with the Liberians. Garvey's mission to Liberia years before had returned with 2 reports, one in glowing praise to be read to his followers, the other a private one, painting an awful picture of the present regime, accusing it of corruption and slavery. One of Garvey's enemies, getting a copy of the secret report, had sent it to the Liberian president. As for his career, in the United States. It was one of strife from the start. Knowing nothing of Negro American history and psychology and the popular conditions of the struggle in the United States, he tried to impose his own way of seeing things rather than working in harmony with the leaders there. A born autocrat, the acclaim and publicity he received also went to his head. Had he ever come to absolute power, he would have been another Robespierre. One of his leading opponents once said, I, for one, would never have lived in Africa under his rule, for he would have been the greatest head-chopping king that ever lived. Moreover, he several times promised his followers that in Africa, he would make them millionaires. To do that, he would have to continue the worst features of white imperialism that was already there. As for the United States, what he really did accomplish on the economic side was to take tens of millions of dollars from the poorest element of the blacks and hand it back to the capitalist whites by a more direct route than by which such money comes to them. To his stockholders, he could well have repeated what his motto, Napoleon, said to his faithful followers after Waterloo. I found you poor, and I leave you poorer. Oh boy. As for the fascism of which he boasted, that was an abomination. If the injustices of color prejudice which had aroused him were disgusting, his solution was no better. On the other hand, it must be said that his movement was exactly the fruit that a soil poisoned by color prejudice might be expected to bear. In any case, the manifestations of ignorance in his followers were no worse and certainly more understandable than those of the better educated whites with their KKK Anglo-Saxon clubs and their black legions. There were certain benefits from his activities which cannot be ignored, however. He stirred the blacks in the New World and parts of Africa to feel that in spite of all the white man's vilifying of them, they were human beings just the same. In other words, he gave them back their self-respect and opened for them windows of hope that would never be closed. In other words, he gave them back their self-respect and opened for them windows of hope that would never be closed. Many could have been reached by no other message but his, that is, the promise of a land where they would no longer be pushed around and abused because of a difference of color. And backing up his emotional appeal, there was the good, solid information about themselves in his Negro world, which was edited by some of the brightest Negro minds of all time. In this and certain other aspects, he did good. And above all, he aroused millions of Negroes and whites in many lands to think of the quote-unquote race problem as they had never done before. Because of this, he will be remembered and idealized more and more with the years. In the case of the quote-unquote strong men as the Mully Ishmaels, Muley, I think that's Muley, Ishmaels, Napoleons, and Robert E. Lee's, the evil they did is usually forgotten, and the good they did is remembered. And in closing, J.A. Rogers leaves a note here. He says, this writer knew Garvey well. He knew him as a boy in the West Indies, attended his meetings in the United States, talked with him, wrote for his newspaper, but was not a member, reported his trial for the press during the 4 weeks it lasted, visited him in Atlanta prison, and saw him in different years in London and talked with him there. it was at one of these talks in 1937 that Garvey boasted he was the first fascist. Wow. Man, that was a real load there, buddy. J.A. Rogers said a mouthful when he wrote that one. Wow. And I've never seen him write about anybody else like that. But apparently, from what he's saying, he knew Garvey and knew Garvey well from before he was in the U.S. and after he left the U.S. So you got to give some credence to what the man says. But man, that was it was a very telling, very cutting. There was a lot of cutting going on in that piece. But I'll let you ruminate on it for yourself. Well, I'll leave it for you as a proverb to decipher and see how you want to, what kind of light you want to cast the piece in, as well as Garvey. Okay? For in the end, he was right with that one quote I made there. I said that he said, what did he say? Above all, he aroused millions of Negroes and whites in many lands to think of the race problem as they had never done before. Because of this, he will be remembered and idealized more and more with the years. Well, never were truer words spoken. You can hardly find a picture of J.A. Rogers anywhere, but you can find pictures of Marcus Mosiah Garvey everywhere. Okay, everywhere. There are all kinds of murals with him in it, etc. While most people, you say the name J.A. Rogers, they hardly know who he is. Mind you, a lot of people will not know who Garvey is either, but there's even fewer that know J.A. Rogers. Let me put it to you that way. Meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and sign out here. Now, this is the first week of August, and so for the rest of this week, I'm going to keep reminding everybody that we need your support, and we need it in a number of ways. Number one, if you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. If you're watching on YouTube, give us the old thumbs up. And first and foremost, most of all, go ahead and make a donation to our new vocation, which is promulgating the history of Black people the world over, of telling our stories as told by us, first and foremost. Telling our stories as told by us. We've had other people telling our stories for far too long, and they've often been told far too wrong. So that's the one thing that we want to do differently, if nothing else, and that is we want to put our story back in the right context. We're not trying to put the genie back in the bottle. We're just trying to make sure that when it comes out, that you get your 3 wishes. Yeah, we want to make sure you get your 3 wishes. So you can make your donations at www.blakfacts.org. You can make your donations in the description area of our Facebook live streams and our YouTube live streams. You'll find links to a donation page. And if you don't see it there because you're on your mobile, then go to your notifications tab. Click the notifications and scroll down, and you'll see on there where you can make a donation as well. But we do need the donations. We need more and more donations. So far, we've been collecting donations at a clip of about $2,000 to $3,000 per year, which is just barely enough to keep us supplied with new materials that we need, particularly for the children. So we need a steady influx, cash influx. We don't want to go to the grant giving agencies. We don't want to go to Ford Motor Company. We're not even trying to go to the public route and go to the universities and all those. We're not trying to have them be our supporters, because he who pays the piper calls the tune. It's our time to call this tune. Do what you need to do. Peace out without a doubt. We'll be black tonight at 9 o'clock. This is Doc Ock at noon and 9 signing off.